the satellite connected to my phone says that we're at 1 o'clock. So in being respectful of everyone's time, we're going to get started. Again, thank you to all of you for finding the time to come to this exploratory meeting, especially on such a lovely day outside. I hope, like myself, all of you are feeling encouraged and positive with this beautiful sunshine and warmer weather outside. Again, if you just arrived, there is a link in the chat to take you to a platform where you can share who you are and what brought you to this meeting today, in lieu of spending all the time we have introducing each other. We're gonna proceed that way. There will be an opportunity for some question and answer later on. We're gonna do just a little bit of preamble before we get started. But mostly to all of you, thank you so much for your time today and for coming and exploring this idea with us. As we get started, I would like to do a brief land acknowledgement. I'm going to share some words that were given to me and encouraged to share by my friend Ray John Jr. of the Oneida Nation on the Thames. We acknowledge the earth and its continuing connection to every single living thing. We acknowledge the early civilizations who lived in harmony with the earth and who continue to utilize the land. We acknowledge the future and that together we can revitalize our livelihood once again. We acknowledge the earth once again for the essence of energy to give us life and love. Thank you to our Mother Earth. Again, those words were shared with me from my friend Ray John Jr. of Oneida Nation on the Thames. And he asked me to share them in times where we're doing land acknowledgements in hopes that we can encourage everybody to remember to commit to ourselves when we wake up every day to face the day with gratitude for the opportunity to share this time and place together. So thank you, Ray John. Okay, this is our agenda for the next, hopefully just an hour to take you through. Again, this is a call to action to explore the concept of creating a collaborative to help address some of the ongoing issues in our local food system. If you're here on this call, hopefully we can start with an understanding that our food system is not working for us in the way that we need it to. There's a lot of problems with it. A lot of times you'll hear people say it's broken or close to it. I hope that we can start with agreement that there's a lot that needs to shift about our food system in order for it to work for all of the people that live in our communities. And we're going to share with you some of the research and evidence that's been done over the past 10 or so years through collaborative efforts under the London Middlesex Food Policy Council umbrella. But I do want to share that these reports were crafted before kind of the last 8 weeks or so. And one of the outcomes from the reports is expressing the urgency for this type of collective action. And I believe that urgency, we can all likely agree, is increasing seemingly by the day, if not by the hour, over the past few weeks, which is the reason we've triggered this call to action now. And again, just thanks for joining us. So our agenda today, we're going to review some of the work done to date. We're going to review some examples of existing regional collaborative projects. We're going to spend some time just having a quick conversation about making sure questions are answered. It's a chance for feedback, and then we'll go over some potential next steps should everyone be interested. Before I dive into the work done to date, just a couple of things of note before we get started. Thank you for coming because no one asked me in particular to facilitate this call. This is just an attempt to say, hey, we have to start somewhere. So thank you for attending, and thank you for attending with curiosity and hopefully positivity. Secondly, as we go through the research, I'm going to do my very best to stay very true to the reports that have been done and not provide any interpretation that's personal on my end. But before we start there, a few people were kind enough to send some questions in advance. And the first thing I wanted to share was, because this question came up a number of times, is what is the difference between the Middlesex London Food Policy Council and a collaborative project or an alliance? I chose the word alliance because it's synonymous with collaborative projects in some of the examples used, and the word sounds fancy. So I like to use that. But just to be clear on what the difference is before we get started, an alliance or a collective action coordination like this is a coordinated set of recommendations that require collective action and collaboration between community-wide groups. That's governments, community members, institutions, organizations, and businesses. The scope and intention of a collective impact project like this is much, much bigger than what any one agency, group, municipality, etc., can accomplish on their own. We're thinking big. We're thinking the systems change that we need to see happen. Can we bring ourselves together and find common ground to discuss what that could look like moving forward? That's what we're exploring today. And hopefully, as a start, that separates the two in the questions that were provided before. And then just as well as that, I'm going to do my best to use, like I said, the language specific to the reports have been given, but there are language choices in the reports that aren't necessarily clear depending on where you're coming from and what your perspective is. One of those is food insecurity versus food security. Food security being an end goal where everyone has everything they need, food insecurity being an issue that needs to be addressed that's more immediate. And another question that was given to me before was food security versus food sovereignty. And that is a similar yet different notion. The terminology that's used in the reports and some of the definitions I'm going to share is for food security. But I believe when you get into the reports and the meat of what's being shared, it does speak to more what I consider a definition of food sovereignty, but being respectful to the reports. And then we were given, I'm going to use food security in my choice of words. So that's everything I wanted to go over beforehand. And let's get things started. Sorry, you'd think that after 5 years, I would be better at managing screen sharing in Zoom. Apologies, everybody. I just have to find where my screen went. Here we go. I have asked Glenn Pearson, one of the co-founders of the London Food Bank, if he would be kind enough to give us a little bit of a synopsis of where this work started that we're going to talk about. Glenn?
Thanks, Andrew. Hey, everybody. It was a decade ago, I think, when some of us came together and realized that we didn't have one place where people could come to get information about food. That could be about food waste, the amount of food that was available through the system, how grocery stores are involved, what's happening in the agricultural communities around the city. So the decision was made to pull four of us together as a group. It was the London Community Foundation, the City of London, Middlesex London Health Unit, and the London Food Bank to see if there was some way we could draw together a food policy council. As I said, that was almost 10 years ago. It was a lot of work, but from that came the community food assessment, a document that I loved and I keep on my desk, including the updated version. But also there was just this general understanding that food was all over the map. And groups like the city and others, as they were doing policy and trying to figure out what to do, needed the kind of information that only a collective group of us could provide. So we wanted to be that voice, I think, and lots of groups got involved at that time. Then came the pandemic, and it seems to me we've kind of lost our way as we moved into that. We're trying to find our way back. It hasn't been easy. There's lots of hunger, lots of food insecurity issues, but we are trying to get to food security. I don't think our dream has been realized yet, even though there's been much progress has been made. We're not fully where we need to be. Andrew's right. There are big things that need to happen in our society, really big things. And it can't be done by one group alone. That's even true in London. It can't be done by the city or any other group. It's going to take a collaboration effort to the breadth of what Andrew is going to be talking about here. And it will take all of us to build that vision. I did want to say that the food bank remains highly committed behind the Middlesex London Food Policy Council. We invest heavily in it each year. But we're very excited about this opportunity to maybe get back to that original vision and just be part amongst all of you of a way in which we can maybe fight for the kind of food security and sovereignty that Andrew was speaking about. So that's been a 10-year journey. We're not there yet. Maybe this can help get us there.
Thank you so much, Glenn. So as Glenn kind of said, once the pandemic hit, the Food Policy Council was what had the opportunity to update the food systems assessment with from they wanted to sharing some of the outcomes from that assessment. An environmental scan was done. And then phase 4, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about today, was exploring the potential for regional collaboration around food security. The 2015 food systems assessment, the 22 assessment, all of the phases of research, and everything that we're going to share today and look at as examples is going to be shared to all meeting attendees, the links to all of those documents. And I will say, if you have not read them in detail, incredibly important to do so because it does provide all of the foundation from which these conversations are happening. On the food systems assessment, completed by Nutrition for Non-Nutritionists, combined interviews, focus groups, and literature review. The key themes coming out of it: sustainable food production, urban and rural, equitable food access, greater attention to diversity, and what and how people eat. And out of that, there's an executive summary that you can look at, especially if you haven't read the whole thing. It's a great place to start. There are 15 recommendations in that out of that food systems assessment, 9 that are shared between the city and the county, and then 4 unique to the county, 2 unique to the city. Their themes, I'm not going to read them all out to you, but their themes are in addressing reconciliation, forwarding reconciliation, equity and inclusivity, the way we develop our communities, how land use is established, urban growing of food within the city boundaries, et cetera, land stewardship, as well as the concept of the need for investment in local food procurement, in shortening local and more self-sustaining supply chains, an investment in food security initiatives and food education, and an investment in local agriculture. That's my brief summary. But what I'm going to focus on for the next couple minutes is the phase 4 summary, which is what we're here talking about today. It's potential for regional collaboration. From the UN Committee on World Food Security, their definition of food security is all people at all times have sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to maintain a healthy and active life. So these are just some key points that I took away from the phase 4 research that if you haven't been through and read it, I think is integral to know for this conversation. If you have read it, this is why we're on Zoom. You can do some other things while I'm going through it. Despite increasing food insecurity, the potential exists for regional collaboration to address gaps in our food system and advance long-term food security for all. This is a quote from the panel. Southwestern Ontario is an agricultural powerhouse. We are one of the most blessed regions in the world, and it is important to recognize the potential of this region. Today, communities generally don't collaboratively engage in planning for how people will be fed. Collaboration has typically resulted from a need to provide food to individuals and households because of an urgent, immediate need when no other options are available. Over time, this has led to innovative and impactful efforts to build food security, including school nutrition programs, food banks, meal programs, redistribution of unused food from commercial sources, amongst many other projects. There have been changes in urban food growing opportunities, including community gardens, food and knowledge sharing initiatives. All of these initiatives, ones I've mentioned and haven't, have been the result of community members, nonprofit organizations, health-focused agencies, businesses, food producers, or social enterprises, amongst others, taking the initiative to address the need they see in front of them in their communities. But none of these originated from a provincial or even a regional vision and plan of action to address long-term food security. Hopefully the difference is clear. This report explores the potential for a structured and supported form of collaboration to strengthen regional long-term food security visioning and sets recommendations for the first steps in setting a common vision for regional food security and collaborating on strategies to move that vision forward. Collaboration is challenging, but its potential benefits far outweigh the challenges. When done effectively, collaboration is a powerful tool for systems change. It prioritizes supportive co-benefits alongside food security, like social justice, climate action, health, economic development, urban growth, and tourism. It's important to remember that no model is or will be perfect. Collaborative approaches in and of themselves are valuable, and the act of communicating, learning, visioning, planning, and acting together is as important as having a set structure within which that collaboration happens. First steps need to be taken with coordination provided by one or more agencies with the resources and capacity and commitment to support this work on an ongoing basis. We don't know right now who those agencies are, although we can discuss some potentials, by the way. But the model itself for collaboration needs to be interactive, flexible, it needs to evolve over time, and it needs to address changing priorities and trends as we go. The following recommendations that we're going to talk about and that are contained within this report intentionally do not assign responsibility. There isn't a clear right way to lead this type of collaborative model. But based on the research, what is clear is that the first step is essential and urgent. And as we mentioned before, is becoming more urgent. Sometimes it feels like by the hour. What we're suggesting is facilitating a process, including stakeholders from all across sectors of the food system, to identify a common vision of long-term food security, along with targets and milestones and a plan of action to reach those targets. And I think that's the most important point, is we've spent 10 years establishing the foundation for this. It's time to act. And if we want to see the change we need to figure out how to do that together. So what does that look like? Because this is a big concept, but there are examples of other communities who in some ways are ahead of where we're at in terms of coming together and doing that visioning, but also in some ways, when you dig beneath the surface, are just starting to dig into the work that we've been doing for almost 10 years here in London and Middlesex. And I think we are close to being able to establish ourselves as leaders in this area. So let's look at some of those examples. The first one is from the Halifax Food Policy Alliance, which was formed in 2013. And it's a multi-sectoral partnership with individuals and organizations working towards a common vision where no one is hungry and everyone has nutritious food they enjoy for generations to come. So this is based on feedback and food system research. And what they chose is to structure their plan in Halifax from recommendations according to the pillars of the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, or MUF, which is one of my favorite acronyms to say. They are an international protocol aimed at tackling food-related issues at a municipal level and have a fantastic structure to follow. Influenced by this pact, the Halifax structure is categorized in these 6 areas: governance, social and economic equity, food production, food supply, processing and distribution, health, wellness, and resilience, and food waste. And when you follow the links that we're going to provide to you, if you haven't already, you can dig into each one of those priority areas. Some of them contain as many as 20 some recommended action areas or focus areas that need to be considered in forwarding this vision, and goes into who potentially could own those different areas of focus and who would be responsible for moving them forward. It's a fantastic structure. There's a lot to digest when you start to look into this one, which is both positive and a little bit overwhelming, but that's okay. So that's the first one, a nice Canadian source for us to potentially learn from. One of my favorites is the San Diego Food Systems Alliance, not just because they're using the alliance word that I like to say, but the San Diego Food Systems Alliance is a diverse and inclusive network of leaders in San Diego County, farmers, fishermen, food business owners, workers, organizers, policymakers, funders, and residents committed to building a food system that works for everyone. Through the Food Systems Alliance of San Diego, they have created an action plan called the 2030 Vision for Food Security. Again, there's a lot to unpack here, but I like the way they've really categorized these buckets or priority areas. So everything in the Good Food Vision of 2030 falls into the three areas of cultivating justice, fighting climate change, and building resilience. The objectives that fall underneath those three categories, number 1 to 4 address major interrelated challenges that San Diego County farms, fisheries, food businesses, and workers face in bringing food from farm, ocean to plate. The one is preserving agricultural land and soils and investing in long-term food production. 2 is increasing the viability of local farms, fisheries, food businesses, and workers. 3 is scaling up local sustainable and equitable food value chains. 4 is elevating wages and working conditions and improving career pathways. And then objectives 5 to 7 address major interrelated challenges that San Diegans themselves face in achieving food security, accessing traditional, healthy, nutritious, and culturally appropriate foods. So these areas: expanding integrated nutrition and food security, improving community food environments, scaling up food waste prevention, recovery, and recycling initiatives. Those are the 3. And then objectives 8 through 10 address major interrelated challenges that communities of color face in shaping food system policies, practices, and narratives, as well as being resilient against risks that threaten everyone. So 8 is increasing leadership by Black, Indigenous, and people of color across the food system. 9, building a local, sustainable, and equitable food movement. 10, planning for a resilient food system. Again, I love the way they've structured this action plan. I think there's a lot to potentially pull from in terms of inspiration for how to structure things moving forward. And this last one that I want to share is the Artisan Grain Collaborative from the Midwest of the United States. This collaborative is much smaller in its scope than some of the 2 others that I've explained, and potentially as a result have the most outcomes to date to share. Although I can't speak to them with too much knowledge, we've been lucky enough to have some participants come to London in our space here and share some of this. This is how I was alerted to it. And I'll share what I know with you today, with the understanding that it's surface level knowledge only. So their mission is to create a diverse regional grain shed in the upper Midwest built on regenerative agriculture practices that steward the health of communities, local economies, and natural resources. Effectively, what they did was they identified that there was a network of bakers, restaurateurs, and food service providers, as well as microbreweries and distilleries in the region that were looking for specific grains, heritage grains, heirloom grains, whether they be corn, soy, hops, or different baking grains. Sorry, I went off script there. That weren't being produced regionally. And what they were able to do was really scope out the understanding of what the market was, how much opportunity there was for different suppliers looking for those inputs for their products. And what they were able to do is identify areas where there was people interested in shifting their agricultural practices to be able to learn how to meet that need and grow those specific products. And they were able to invest in those farmers to be able to begin growing these different types of grains that weren't being produced in the region. And over a period of what I believe was 2 to 5 years, was able to begin scaling up that agricultural scope to be able to meet that consumer demand. And now they have a really healthy local economy where they've created a brand new product that's so distinct to that region because of the inputs that all of these bakeries and breweries and food service providers are able to provide. It's given them an opportunity to establish a whole regional tourism wing around these products and around these signature fingerprint of what's now in the area. And they've done so while also stewarding the land more responsibly and addressing some of the issues that were coming out of agriculture there. So again, just going to their official narrative, moving grains from farm to table is a group effort. We work on strengthening the Midwest grain shed through 5-member-led working groups and facilitate information sharing, organize gatherings, and offer support and connection for the regional grain chain. So this is what they do. They function through working groups as opposed to advisory panels or a combination of advisory groups and working groups like the other collaboratives. And those working groups are ones specifically for bakers, specifically for brewers or distillers. And then they offer working groups that manage the education, outreach, and communication, both with the community, but also within partnerships within the collaborative. There is a farmer collaborative working group to help farmers better understand the needs of the businesses and industry that they're supplying, and also just how to support each other as they're growing product that hasn't been grown in that region for a very long time. And then there's a whole working group around the idea of institutional procurement, because again, if you're going to move the food system, you need to move the dial economically, and our institutions are some of the largest players in the region and important to have on board and getting involved in any, call it ecosystem shifts. So again, just reviewing what the recommended priority areas are out of the food systems assessment that's been done here locally. Those priority areas being food access and addressing food insecurity, social inclusion and equity, the advancement of reconciliation, climate action and land stewardship, economic development of the regional agri-food sector, public engagement and education, and regional tourism opportunities. The reason I brought this up at the end is hopefully it's obvious to all of us that the work that's been done to date, the research that is here in local, aligns almost perfectly with the examples we're seeing elsewhere. To me, that speaks to the fact that the research was done well, that our starting point is a solid foundation. It speaks to the fact that I think we can all acknowledge that we are collectively, as a country, as a continent, are dealing with very similar issues around our food system. And to me, this says that the models that are there for us to learn from and build what we can do from likely will apply really well to what the recommendations are out of the reports that we have. So the recommendations and first steps out of the Phase 4 report are to mobilize. Thank you for coming today. To figure out how to come together to create that shared vision. And again, for what it's worth, I believe that shared vision is pretty much there and defined. It's just a matter of going through the process of wordsmithing in a way that works for everyone that we gather around this table. We need to establish a collaborative structure, both for communication, for decision-making, for what working groups, advisory groups are just two examples of ways to figure out how to mobilize and turn all of this into collective action. And then how do we create that collective action plan with measurable goals and indicators of success? And just a note that those goals and indicators of success is recommended that each priority has demonstrated benefits individually that all align with that common vision of food security for the region. I was aiming to not go past 1:30, and it is exactly 1:30 again on my satellite clock. So just very quickly, what we are proposing out of today before we go into discussion is our lovely Kathy, who is our staff at the Middlesex London Food Policy Council right now, is going to follow up this meeting with an email with both the recording of this meeting, with all of the links and the presentation that was shared today so that everybody can look into these themselves. And there's going to be a survey, and it's fundamentally important that people fill out the survey, provide feedback. Are you interested in next steps? And there's going to be opportunity to share where you may be interested. We are going to need to ask for some contributors who are interested in coming together for the visioning, for creating that structure for what a collaborative could look like. That's going to be the most immediate and upfront time commitment, is to establish what this could look like. And then from there, there's opportunities, especially if you're going, I'm interested in potentially being involved in next steps, but I'm not sure where I fit in. You can click some of the areas, priority areas that we shared in the report, where you see yourself being interested in contributing. And once that structure is established, we will be following up with everybody who fills out that survey with what next steps could look like. So again, first steps being the visioning and the collaborative structure, and then the rest will start to fall into place afterwards, we hope. This is where we're going to open things up for discussion. And I have had the opportunity to be a part of some collaborative impact projects in my 30-year career now in the food industry. And I found these housekeeping notes to be very helpful when I first entered into the space. So if you haven't done this before, forgive me while I over-explain our discussion, but I found these to be helpful. So I wanted to share them, and then we're going to open up the floor. I believe, Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, if you will have a question, feedback, or comment you want to share, you're welcome to do that in the chat, and Kathy will share those with me. If there's something that needs to be vocalized, you're also welcome to raise your hand and ask a question or share feedback, and we'll do our best to respond. So before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you haven't already, if you joined late, please do follow the link early in the chat and fill out our form so we know who all is here and what brought you here. For all of us on this call, something of note, we want everyone to be able to look back at who was here and identify who we could be missing. We certainly don't claim to have done a good enough job in inviting everybody that has something to contribute. And hopefully we can all leave space open in this process for those who aren't here yet, but should and could be. And then from there, just in our discussion, if we can all work together to find a collaborative mindset, thinking how can we versus why can't we? Focusing on actions and solutions as opposed to problems and barriers. Although maybe we could have our own separate working group where we can vent about those problems and barriers that we all exist in every day. That we can work towards finding common ground. And on that, this is one of the most important pieces that I try and remind myself when coming into these discussions is compromise at this table, because compromise is absolutely essential as a part of any major collective action. Compromise at this table doesn't mean compromise in our individual work. And sometimes the path forward isn't straight or clear. It sometimes takes a windy path that brings you backwards before you move forwards. Nothing is or will be perfect. And finally, in life, not much that's worth doing comes easy. And from there, these are the links that will be provided to you. Huge thanks for coming. I'm going to open the floor.
Can you see who has their hands up, Andrew?
I can. I'm going to start, but please help me out if I'm falling behind. JBM is your screen name that I can see.
Yeah. Jose Medina, Deserve Holdings. Andrew, first of all, excellent work, excellent way of explaining where we're at, where we want to be. And I think that overall it is an interesting piece of work. I think that the only part that I will add, or I would like us to challenge, is the thought of being self-sufficient. I don't know if Canada is or the region, or in this case, Middlesex, is self-sufficient. And what I mean by that is if we can produce and feed the people that we have in our area. And the reason why I say that is because, as we know, and as we are living now, the market conditions can change quite easily, and that's something that moving forward we need to prepare. That will be something that I think that it is worth it at least to consider.
I I'm going to do my best not to respond to every question and comment, by the way, and just let some things be what they are. But I just want to say I expect that most people on this call would agree wholeheartedly with that. I don't believe that the intention of this research is to promote a completely self-sufficient food system. As a former chef and lover of food, the fact that we have the access and ability to move food around the world the way that we do and be able to access ingredients from all over the place is one of the greatest gifts and progressions that our society has achieved. But there is a balance, and I think that there is what the evidence is suggesting is that we would be a lot better suited to be more self-sufficient than we are, that there's benefit in shortening some supply chain and making ourselves less susceptible to some of the recently the examples of threats and suggestion that things are going to get a little bit crazier. And if we can be a little bit more self-sufficient and tweak that balance, I believe that's where we're going to, as opposed to fully self-sufficient. So I 100% agree, and thank you. Peggy. Hello.
Everybody. Hi, that was a great job, Andrew, especially those inspiring quotes one after the other at the end. What I really loved about what you did today is it's a let's get going overall message. Not going to be perfect. I think we first saw a definition of food security in 1997, one of Canada's second attempts at a food policy. I don't want to fuss over definitions. Some people are hungry and others aren't. Let's get going. And that as much as we like relativity these days, some things are kind of finite. We have so many people we need to feed. There's a certain distribution of protein, carb, fruits and veggies. Let's hit that target, make sure it's distributed. And I think you've given us some inspiring models of real progress. And so really it's more a comment than anything. And I'm with you. Let's get going. Bravo.
Thank
you.
Oh, thank you, Peggy. I also want to say thank you for the opportunity to all of you for attending and letting me facilitate the session. I do just want to be clear, although myself, on behalf of the Food Policy Council, is happy to continue playing potentially a backbone role in continuing to move this forward. And we'll say the Food Policy Council is better positioned than ever before in terms of having some resources to contribute, especially to the inaugural work. I just want to be clear that there's no assumption from myself or the Food Policy Council that we will continue to play a leadership role unless it is something that is decided upon by a collaborative. So I just want to be clear about that. And I do, if there is time in this discussion, would love to share some personal thoughts that don't necessarily come from the region on some things to consider in terms of action items. But again, I want to be careful about going cart before the horse and assuming that my vision and goals speaks for more than myself. And I don't want to present things that way. I've been trying very, very much to stick to the research. So if there's time, I can share some of those, what action could look like. But for the moment, I'm not seeing any hands. Kathy, are you seeing any that I'm not seeing? Oh, thank you. Chantel?
Hi, sorry. My name's Chantel Crockett. I'm with the Agricultural Adaptation Council primarily, but I'm also a counselor in Thames Centre. And following Jose's comment, I've been trying to craft a question, so I apologize if it's a bit wordy. I think to Jose's point is that there needs to be a side conversation on what a local supply chain looks like. And in addition to that is that I don't believe that the food systems in place now are going to be the food systems in place in the future. And we need to look at that at a level of what's available on the shelf at retail, what ingredients are available at a fair price, as well as seasonal changes, climate changes, etc. There's so many variables that factor into something like this. Wearing my AAC hat, we have an internal committee that's looking at agri-food by 2050 in both optimistic, pessimistic, as well as a status quo system by 2030, 2040, 2050. And really, groups like this are excellent in convening and catalyzing that conversation. And I think further to the points that you made is that we need to ensure that there's a seat at the table for everyone. There's a lot of wonderful thinkers out there, sometimes not as many doers. And I just want to make sure that moving forward that there's some really tangible actions that are able to be accomplished, and we don't get stuck in the thought process of accumulating. I saw a presentation earlier this week. I believe it was a quote from Einstein that says, if you're going to solve a problem in an hour, you take 55 minutes to think about it and 5 minutes to make the decision. And I think our way of thinking really needs to be outside of the box on food security and agri-food in general. So I guess not really a question, more of a comment, but I just wanted to share that.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Chantel. I am, personally speaking, so excited to learn from some of the resources and the work that's being done that you spoke to, because it's not something I'm completely familiar with, and I think that is an absolute necessary part of this process. I don't have anything else to add. That was brilliant. Thank you. Brendan?
Yeah, thanks. Really great information being shared here. I am approaching this conversation through sort of a climate change planning lens. That's been my area of focus the last few years. And I don't really have a question, but more of a suggestion of reading. I'll paste a link in the chat. For folks that aren't familiar, the province published a climate change risk assessment a couple of years ago, an impact assessment, which has extensive discussion about agricultural impacts. And I think being that this group is interested in sort of a regional lens to food security, it would be really worthwhile for us to try to contextualize some of our long-term planning within this provincial forecast, because I think there's going to be alignment in priorities, and that can help us with some of the advocacy and outreach components. Anyway, yeah, thank you for your work and looking forward to being part of this moving forward.
Thank you, Brendan. That's super helpful. And Kathy from the Food Policy Council just said, well, we're going to add your link to the list of resources that we share with people.
Hi, Andrew. I have a question or comment, but I can't figure out how to put my hand up. So
hi, Ellen. Nice
I haven't been doing Zoom meetings for 3 months, so I guess I've forgotten. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. Wow, this is so amazing to see so many people. I just wanted to make I don't know, I'm just putting it out there. When we originally, I think when we originally talked about a regional agri-food network or a regional, I think we were thinking bigger than just Middlesex, London, because food and farms and everything else is really, there's no borders, just like climate change and trade and everything else. So I don't know whether that's something that we talk about at the beginning of this process, we get going and then we invite other people in, or if that's something to consider at the beginning where we consider all of the adjoining Southwestern Ontario kind of, I mean, it's not just Middlesex, London, right? And we're all dealing with the same issues, and the food system could be much stronger if we weren't just talking about our little area here. But I just wanted to bring that up, and I'm just so happy to see everybody.
Thank you, Ellen. It's nice to see you. We all miss you. For everyone, this is a really good segue because I wanted to share these two pieces. Um, some potential of what action can look like from these types of collaboration. My personal thought on what Ellen said is let's get started and leave that space open for others to join as we can. I think if we can find that place, it'll be easy to have people join. But some examples of action is sometimes in a collaborative group like this or an alliance, things are as simple as policy recommendations, whether they're coming from the Food Policy Council, whether they're coming from other members of an alliance. I know I at one point sat on a policy advisory group for the Chamber of Commerce. When policy recommendations are coming forth, this type of collective action can be as simple as an amplification of those representation of those recommendations. So when a group is bringing forward that recommendation, to have a process where an alliance can get behind it adds a significant amount of weight and advocacy for those recommendations. Same thing with political advocacy to have a process where envision everyone that's on this call and everyone who's expressed regrets and is going to watch the meeting later and come join us, being behind all of our advocacy efforts. It really strengthens and just mobilizes the how much support is behind those recommendations. So that is the most simple way that I've been a part of these collective groups. And things that are more impactful, like the Grain Collaborative. I was trying to do a little bit of research on just the buying power that some of our local institutions have. But just as an example, because those numbers aren't clearly published in annual financials, if you look at our universities, our hospitals, some of our municipally run food service businesses, but it does appear that, just as an example, let's say the alliance came together and said, let's see if those institutions alone can shift their food procurement to increase the Ontario grown and raised foods by 5 to 10% over 5 years. Let's just say that that's throw that at the wall target. It looks like the impact of that is in the hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Again, more research that's spending and looking. I'm seeing a few. That's a small, and there are things in my head that aren't really from the research, are just starting points for thinking of what an alliance like this could be capable of. I'm just kind of scrolling through as I'm trying to identify if anyone else has things to share.
Jess has her hand up, Andrew. Is Andrew still here? I think his.
I thought it was just me, but everybody else had the same problem.
I think his email was cutting out, Kathy.
Yeah.
I was a little bit problematic.
On my back.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Hi, everybody. I'm back.
Hi. Jess
I
has
don't
a
know
question or comment. I don't know
what
if you want to
happened.
turn off your video, Andrew, just to it might help with the
Zoom fun. Zoom fun. Hi, Jess. I can see that you're handy.
That's it, Andrew. Thank you, and it's good to
Jeff.
see you again. I'm just in line with the conversation about local procurement, and I'm new to this conversation locally and relatively new locally at all. I'm just wondering if an additional part of the conversation, in addition to local procurement, is about ethical procurement. So, for example, universities that are making contracts with companies that are supporting prison labor across Turtle Island and other violent practices. Like, is that also part of the conversation so that we're thinking ethically in a broader sense?
Can everybody hear me?
You are cutting in and out.
No?
Do you want to try turning your camera off?
My wonderful staff just gave me another computer. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Just to answer your question, I think that's fantastic to consider. And I think that the evidence in the report is there to support what you were saying, if that answers your question. Sorry, technology, I'm now distracted. Craig, do you want to go next?
Hi, everyone. Craig Clifford, Western University Hospitality Services. I know, Andrew, you mentioned some of the institutions, and I can speak a little bit to what we do in hospitality services at Western. We are very much interested in participating in the local food movement and the coalition. We recently attended the Ontario Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association conference and spoke there and met with them. I wonder if there is a bit of a partnership there as well. The farmers are very interested in selling their produce to local supporters, not just big box grocery stores, but to smaller vendors and to institutions like ourselves. And so it's about making those connections. And I think sometimes, we're very large, and so we can't have every baker, butcher, and vegetable grower showing up to our back doorstep. We tend to use a lot of large distribution suppliers such as Cisco or GFS. And Andrew, I know you work in the culinary world, so you'd be familiar with those distribution partners. So I guess we're looking for opportunities, or how do we bring all those players together? Is there some type of I suggested like an online forum. There's so many media platforms out there that are like sharing resources. I think even about Facebook Marketplace, similarly, or some of the food programs like Good to Go, where people can post foodstuffs online and other people can bid for the opportunity to receive those foodstuffs. Second Harvest works in a similar format. We're partnered with Meal Care and Second Harvest. So yeah, we're definitely open to suggestions and looking for opportunities to buy local and buy sustainable. It's a big part of our policy and our initiatives going forward. I will make a couple other quick comments about your introduction, and you were saying that with the food policy that it needs to be something that's sustainable and has continuity throughout this group and adaptability as the markets change and trends change. And I wonder if we can just create some defined roles or even defined objectives that because players will move in and out of this group. People move on, people move into different roles. I'm very new here, so forgive my ignorance if I'm not talking intelligently, or I'm not sure all what's involved, but some sort of defined objectives or roles where people that are maybe joining for the first time kind of can fit in right from the get-go or understand kind of how it works.
Craig, thank you so much for that. As you were talking, just feeling very excited and encouraged myself. And to the first part of what you were saying, as a large institution, I don't want to pretend for a second that I used as an example, like increasing local procurement is not simple. It's not easy. It's going to take time. It's going to take resources. It's going to take strategy and planning. When you kind of dig into both the phase 4 report and some of the other examples shared, successful areas where they've been able to involve larger institutions in increasing and strengthening shorter and local supply chains. Incremental moves can have big impact, and that's important to note because it requires investment, both from the institution in terms of time and understanding how things happen. You often have to start and support on the agricultural side, so you can kind of meet in the middle. And there is recommendations for identifying, creating where necessary, investment for that to happen. But there are paths to follow. We wouldn't be the first in this region to tackle something that big. So love to hear that you're on board with potentially staying involved and that we can continue those discussions. To the second part of what you were saying, you mentioned just objectives and structure, and that is exactly what I'm referring to as a part of that visioning process. There has to be communication structure, there has to be organizational structure to the collaborative, and there has to be an understanding that it shouldn't be a limitation for any agency or group or level of government even to be able to participate in something like this. There just needs to be established structure that says, so-and-so can sit on an advisory group or a working group. They can be a part of the alliance. Doesn't necessarily mean you are 100% in agreement with everything that the alliance is pushing forward. But it's finding those common areas, that common vision where we can move forward together. And again, being a part of collective impact requires certain levels of compromise, but there should be all in balance for everybody involved. And thank you, Craig, because I was really encouraged by everything that you shared, totally in agreement and filled with some hope that we can keep this moving forward. Who am I missing? And again, just shout out to my staff for coming rescuing with a second laptop. Thank you for that. for that. I have an amazing team here.
Rebecca did have their hand
Oh,
up.
yeah. I didn't know if we were running out of time. So if there's a moment, that'd be great. But if not, understand if I have to wrap up.
Go for it, Rebecca.
So I'm Rebecca. I'm from Lifespan. I'm a program coordinator there. Just like a perspective to throw out, kind of because we're going kind of like large industry wise. I think it's worth keeping in mind just a lot of the work we do is around people just acquiring ODSP in Ontario Works and just the amount that they get to buy food. So we've been working on advocacy to increase that amount, but that might be a perspective to take and to do work on, especially for specialty diets. Like they can't afford healthy food that is related to their diet. So that's just a perspective to keep in mind for if I think it feels like it fits in here, just like people have access to those foods.
It is. Thank you, Rebecca, and is a fundamentally important part of everything that we're talking about. In a perfect world, I would like to think that in moving forward, we can structure this collaborative so that different groups are working on these different aspects. You can't have discussions about forwarding food economy and moving the dial economically on things while not considering the environmental impacts of those decisions. You can't be talking about long-term food security and leaving immediate food insecurity unaddressed. But being able to break them down into categories so that people in their areas of expertise can come together and work with others to help forward this agenda. And then I think the hope of the collaborative is that the people working on all of these different areas will be able to put their support behind all of the other areas, even the ones that they're not directly involved in, so that we can move this forward in much larger steps than any of us little guys that are working in the trenches every day can. Thank you, Rebecca. That was great. Being mindful of the time, everybody. One thing we try and pride ourselves on is being efficient with time. You guys have all given an hour. I'm fine to stay on if we want to continue discussion now, or again, just a reminder that next steps, we're going to be sending out a follow-up survey to help categorize where everyone sees themselves having capacity and interest to potentially continue this moving forward. If it is in the visioning and structural element of what a collaborative could look like, we'll be getting in touch soon and trying to move relatively quickly. But what happens from this meeting is going to be directly correlated to who we hear from next. So with all of that, a massive thank you to everybody who came today, to everybody who's watching this recording or reading the notes later and reading all of the reports and links. Thank you for showing up today for our region and for food security. Please do follow up, because it is only based on what the response from all of you is that will determine if we keep this moving forward. So please do fill that out, and until that structure is established, we will continue with the next steps, and hopefully we'll have a mandate to figure out what moving forward as a collective looks like. I did see, just really quickly with the last minute, someone had their hand up. They were there, then they were gone. Where are you?
I think it was Dina, but she might have been trying to clap for you
Oh,
and then accidentally raised her hand, because there was two emojis. And I think she may have stepped in.
then let's leave it there with the intention that this dialogue remains open. Please do reach out to us. You can follow up with the Middlesex London Food Policy Council email address. I am reachable directly. Just look my name up. It's easy to get in touch with me, but please do fill out the survey, and hopefully we can move into action planning soon as a region. Thank you to all of you so much. It gives me so much hope to see so many of you here. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, filled with lots of good food to eat. Thanks, everybody.